Today we have a special guest, Mr. Jeff Barnes. So there's life is very interesting, and you never know who you meet and how many different paths cross. I came from a small town in Wilcox, Arizona, right? Uh, I meet him in Rotary, and come to find out, you were like right down the street from me back then, and then now you're over here, and we're in the same Rotary Club.
Yeah, probably no one in this room, maybe no one even watching on YouTube has ever heard of Wilcox, Arizona.
Most likely.
Cochise County,
Nope,
Arizona.
never.
If you ever saw the
Oh, you
movie
have?
Tombstone,
Oh, no. Yep.
then you know where we're talking about. And that was my neck of the woods from 2000 to 2009. And we were neighbors and didn't even know it.
Yep. And so you lived in Sierra Vista?
Correct.
Sierra Vista, also a little dinky area over there that nobody knows
Middle
about.
of nowhere town. It's claim to fame. World's first McDonald's drive-thru.
I did not know that.
Yep.
How in the hell did that become Sierra Vista's claimed? I would imagine that McDonald's would be out here somewhere, the first drive-thru.
So what happened was the commander for the Army base, Fort Huachuca, which is really the only reason why there is a Sierra Vista, Arizona, would not let the troops, when they were off post, go into civilian facilities while they were still in uniform. And it was killing the fast food business, particularly during dinner hour. And so the McDonald's got super innovative, and they were like, well, if they don't have to leave their car, then they won't be violating the commander's orders. And so they came up with the drive-through window so that they could get dinner on the way home and not get in trouble with the commander back on Fort Huachuca.
Wow.
That's interesting.
Hey, if nothing else happens tonight, that's value right there, man.
There you go.
That's cool.
Necessity, right?
So people cross paths for a number of different reasons, but could you give us a little bit of insight on what it is that you do, your normal job?
So I was in higher education for 22 years, which is why I was in Sierra Vista, Arizona. Came to Southern California in 2011, where I worked with California Baptist University as Dean of Student Success, Professor of Humanities. And as Professor of Humanities, I taught standard courses like first half of U.S. history, second half of U.S. history, American government, state and local government, writing for university success. Courses nobody cares about, right? Because they all sound way too familiar. And I created the world's first, and I believe still only, college course on the history of Disneyland. See, that got everybody's attention. And now
Nobody cares
eyes are
about
wide
any of
open.
the other stuff.
That was the wow moment. And 10 years ago, this summer, published the first of a succession of best-selling books, and fortunately was able to retire in 2022. And now I get to write and speak full-time, traveling the country and traveling the world, sharing Walt Disney's wisdom, but more importantly, how that wisdom can change the trajectory of your life, your career, your success.
I think you might be a good guest.
Well, thank you.
And just as a caveat, I actually coached at Cal Baptist University. We were the first national champions of any sport, springboard diving.
Wow.
So again, over there, Cal Baptist.
What are the odds? Here we are.
See, this is a lot of interesting stuff. There's stuff above my pay grade, but okay.
and I just, because I think you're going to get there, but in case you don't,
yeah, I won't.
I know this is your 13th episode. Number 13 was Walt Disney's favorite number, and I don't want to share why. Maybe we'll hold that on for the very end of the episode.
Yeah, maybe you guys can guess.
So, all right.
Okay, so the number 13 is interesting, but also you were telling me when we were walking to the car that the first time that you gave us a
That's
talk
right.
in this building.
Yeah, so 10 years ago, I had just hit send on my first book, The Wisdom of Walt, Leadership Lessons from the Happiest Place on Earth. And that book, in terms of what it took to write and publish, has its own backstory. And I got an invitation from the Corona Noon Rotary Club to come and speak about that. The first time I ever spoke about Walt Disney, Disneyland, anywhere. And it was right here in this building 10 years ago this spring, before the book ever published in July of 2015. So I feel like I came home tonight because that was the springboard. And I was just hoping, to sell a few copies of the book. And I had no idea that it would be so successful that it would allow me to retire and write and speak and travel full time.
Why do you think that is?
Whew. Well, I think first of all, everybody knows the name Disney, right? And I want to challenge those who are in the room, those who are watching, those who are listening. Think about when you hear the name Walt Disney, what is the first thing that comes to mind? Happiest place on earth. So we've got some Disneyland folks here with us. I love that. Somebody else, what is the first thing that comes to mind? Star Wars. More the Bob Iger era, and that's okay. And we can have that conversation. What about for you? The castle. Oh, yeah. The branding, right? The logo. Magic. Cinderella. What do you mean by the first? There you go. That's right. In fact, we have the 70th birthday coming up this July, July 17th. I want you to start thinking about Walt Disney completely different starting right now. Because people don't realize Walt Disney was not born successful. Raise your hand if you were not born successful. Walt Disney had a difficult relationship with his father. Raise your hand if you've had a difficult relationship with at least one parent. Impoverished childhood. Bankrupt at the ripe old age of 21. Lost his first successful cartoon character. No one believed in Snow White, and no one believed to include his own wife and his own brother in his dream for Disneyland. And so when we hear the name Walt Disney in 2025, it's tempting to think of success, right? It's tempting to think of Disneyland, the happiest place on earth, and this idea that people are going to come and they're going to spend money and we're going to have this amazing and magical day, and he was first, and all of that is true. But behind that story is a story of resiliency and a story of heartbreak. And I like to lean into that story and help us recognize that when you know that story, you start to realize we're all Walt Disneys. And we can be our own Walt Disney when we know that story. And I think more importantly, the story behind Disneyland and the stories that the park are telling us each and every time we go to the happiest place on earth.
What prompted you to create that class?
Great question. Two things. First of all, the very first time I went to Disneyland, which was August of 1988, I had a horrific experience. I tried to get on Star Tours, which was the newest, latest, greatest. I walked in at 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning. I didn't know what I didn't know. And stepped into Tomorrowland, asked where Star Tours was, and was told by a cast member, was in the right place for the ride, wrong place for the line. Was redirected back to the start of Main Street. Took me more than 3 hours to experience my first Disneyland attraction. By the time we were done with Star Tours, it's the middle of the afternoon, it's hot, it's crowded. If you had told me by that evening I'd be doing what I'm doing today, I would say you were absolutely crazy. But I stayed in California long enough to realize everybody loves it. What did I miss? And Walt once said, what does it take to be successful? It comes down to 4 C's. And for Walt Disney, those 4 C's are, and if you're listening at home, you might want to write these down. The 4 C's for success for Walt Disney are courage, confidence, consistency, and curiosity. I am insatiably curious. So I had to know, why does everyone else love it And I hated it, and I had this awful experience. And that's when I discovered, again, Walt wasn't born successful, difficult relationship with his dad, bankrupt at age 21. Nobody believed. I just fell in love with that story. And then, secondly, in higher education, as Dean of Student Success, I was working every single day with students who were struggling. These were students who had the ability to do the work. They simply weren't doing the work. And I could sit down with them and tell them, here's what it takes to be successful. Here's what it takes to see your own goals and own dreams come true. And if you've ever worked with teenagers or college students, you know they're going to turn you off in about 30 seconds. But guess what everybody loves, especially here in Southern California? Disneyland. And so if I could leverage something they already knew, something they already loved, and connect it with them, and again, their own goals, their own dreams, then possibly I could have something here. And so I wanted to do my job a little bit differently. And that's what gave me the courage to create the class.
How did that work in the class once you get, because I'm imagining some of the other professors are like, Disney, really? Right?
Well, that's a key part of my keynote because there's really two reactions. A, seriously? Like, really? People are going to spend tuition dollars, federal funding on a college course based on the history of an amusement park? But then other people are like, wow, where was that class when I was in college? You know, Walt Disney once said, all of our dreams can come true if we have the courage to pursue them. And you have to have the courage not only to pursue your dreams, but to think a little bit differently, to do things a little bit differently. And in 1955, the United States had 2,000 amusement parks, but they were only parks that engaged us physically. They didn't engage us mentally. They didn't spark our imaginations. Walt wasn't building an amusement park. He was building a theme park, a story-based park. And that's what was different. I knew I was building a class that the rest of academia might not get, might not understand. And the more they hated it, the more I knew I was on the right path. But then secondly, and this is a key part of my personal story and my personal journey, the day after I gave the very first lecture, I was actually diagnosed with a life-threatening brain tumor. And my doctor at Cedars-Sinai in downtown Los Angeles told me, it's life-threatening. You've got the weekend to get your affairs in order. I need you back here on Tuesday for brain surgery. And because of the invasiveness of the surgery, you're going to be out of work anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks. And I refused because the class at its core wasn't about the amusement park or even the theme park. It was about resiliency. It was about overcoming obstacles so that you can be successful. Well, this was a chance not just to teach that, but to actually.
We can definitely get into that. So courage, because you literally did something that nobody else has done, and you knew that some people were going to frown upon it. But then the second C was confidence.
Yes.
Right?
Which Walt said, out of the 4 C's, confidence is the most important.
So did you have confidence, or was that something that you worked towards, or how does that?
Absolutely not. In fact, I went to Disneyland on my second trip in June of 1991. And I came back just enthralled because now I knew the story. And I experienced the park through the lens of Walt's story. And I understood he wanted to be remembered as a storyteller. And he built the park for the purpose of telling stories. It's a completely different experience. And I said to some friends, as soon as I got home, I'm going to write a Disney book one day. I had no idea what that meant. But I think more importantly, I had no idea how to do it. I didn't know who would publish it. And I had all of these, like, who am I? And what was me? I mean, there were a million reasons for why I was never going to write this Disney book that I said way back in June of 1991, I'm going to write a Disney book one day. And if I'm being 100% honest, when I proposed the Disneyland course and when I taught the Disneyland course, it was a way of getting out of having to write the book. Because I was in higher ed. I'd been teaching for decades. I knew how to do that. I didn't know how to write the book. And on the other side of not just teaching the class, but on the other side of the brain surgery, and FYI, I survived. Thanks for asking.
Well, that's
Appreciate
good.
the
I was
concern.
wondering. I was
know.
wondering. I'm glad.
Little spoiler alert. On the other side of the surgery, I look back on my life, and it was sort of the first brush with mortality. And I'm like, if that had been it, my only regret would have been I never wrote the book. And now I didn't care. That gave me the confidence of, I'm going to write this book. I don't care that I don't know how. I don't care that I don't know who's going to publish it. I don't care that I have no clue how to market it. I'm writing it anyway. And what had been 25 years of woe is me, I don't know how, zero confidence, wrote it and sent it to my editor and published it in 143 days.
Wow. That's great. Yeah.
And so talk about trajectory, right? One of the things I'm most passionate about is I don't want to see anyone in this room or anyone who's listening or watching to have to face a life-threatening illness before you have the confidence to start moving toward your goal and your dream. You have what you need already. Let's go.
So this is a reminder for everybody just to focus on what is it? Because again, you had all of this going against you. You decided, you made a decision. And I think maybe, and what was the third C?
Well, we talked about confidence,
Confidence,
courage,
It was courage,
curiosity, consistency.
consistency. So this is number 13, right? So for what we're doing, consistency. Anyway, so oh, I thought you were gonna say
No, I was just saying.
we've been going back and forth, but we have been here every Wednesday.
Good for you.
Yeah, for a year and a half.
Yeah.
Not here every Wednesday, but we've been doing this every
It's
Wednesday.
the 13th live podcast, but we're probably like 100 maybe.
Yeah.
Pretty close to it as far as meetings. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's gone through different iterations. Sometimes we just have like networking things. We have speakers, so it's
But you're consistent.
but we are consistent. That
Good
is
for you.
one thing that we can do.
Yep.
So how did that consistency fit into what you were doing with the classes and then with the book? Because the writing
Great question. So with regard to the classes, in higher ed, and this is true in education across the board, the temptation is to think that an academic problem requires an academic solution. So I was dealing with struggling students who, again, had the ability to do the work, but they weren't showing up for class, and they weren't doing the homework, and they weren't taking the quizzes, and they were missing out on the exams. Well, I inherited a department of great people, and they were doing the traditional academic kinds of things, i.e., let's have a note-taking seminar. Let's have a workshop on how to take a quiz or take an exam. Well, what good is a note-taking seminar if the student's not going to class?
Much.
And so we started really emphasizing consistency in attendance, consistency in homework, consistency in quizzes, consistency in examinations. I think it was Woody Allen who said 90% of life is showing up. Good things happen when you show up. In fact, I've thought about going off brand a little bit and writing a one-off book titled Show Up, because I keep hearing that story over and over and over again. Amazing things happen when you get over yourself, when you have the courage and the confidence to show up, right? And show up with consistency and just, see what happens. And then secondly, in terms of writing the book, I gave myself what I refer to as a mini habit. Here's what happens. We trick ourselves into thinking we're going to go from, I don't know how to do this thing, who am I? I'm a nobody. This will never happen. To I'm going to sit down and write War and Peace in one morning.
Yeah.
Does that sound familiar? And so we set ourselves up for failure instantly. I completely changed my mindset. And my goal was to write a minimum of 333 words every single day. Well, you can write 333 words. And oh, by the way,
Yeah. Why?
like D minus piece of crap, 333 words. None of this, like I'm going to edit every word, every sentence, every paragraph, no, just write. Because writing is rewriting. And you can't rewrite what you have not written. And so I just made a commitment, no matter what happens, non-negotiable, 333 words every single day. It took anywhere from 5 to 15 to 20 minutes. Now, there were some days when I wrote 500 words. There were some days when I wrote 1,000. I think there was a weekend when I did like 4,500 words. There was never a single day that I didn't write at least 333.
Why did you come up with that number?
Because of Club 33.
Ah.
Which I'm not a member of. I've been fortunate to go to on a number of occasions. If I had the money, I don't know that that's what I would choose to do with it. But I just sort of made it my own internal Club 33. And I would sit down and do at least 333 words every single day. It's the power of the mini habit. And I never tried to finish the book in a single morning or a single day or a single weekend. I just tried to write to the next day. Think about it like this. If we were to get into the car tonight and drive to Orlando to go to Walt Disney World, doesn't that sound fun? If we were to get into the car tonight and drive to Orlando, Florida and go to Walt Disney World, you wouldn't try to have enough gas in the car to get all the way to Orlando. You just need enough gas to get to the next gas station. You just need the headlights to be bright enough to see 20 feet down the road. Those are your habits. You just need to get to the next day. You just need to get to the next iteration. And we overthink and we psych ourselves out. And as a result, we don't build any sort of consistency or confidence.
You know, it kind of sounds to me like a little bit of your confidence came from the ability to like weed out any other option. Like there is no tomorrow. There
Yes.
might not be a tomorrow.
And I got that from Walt.
Yeah, so you don't have an option to wait, right? But it sounds like even with the consistency, a lot of it is weeding out your options. Do you think that's kind of in line with confidence?
Absolutely. And the story, it is the signature line from the keynote that I'm asked to give most often. When Walt went bankrupt with his first studio, Laugh-O-Gram Studio, back in 1923, again at the ripe old age of 21. A lot of us here in Southern California no doubt saw the Disney 100 that was going on about 18 months ago, which was a wonderful celebration. How many companies last 100 years, especially companies like Disney. But again, they weren't telling the other side of the story. It was also the 100th anniversary of Walt going bankrupt. Well, when he went bankrupt, he could have given up. He could have stayed stuck in Kansas City. He doesn't do that. He comes to California, but most importantly, he comes to California by boarding a train, and he boards that train with all of $40, a single suitcase, and a one-way ticket. He's all in. There were no other options. He wasn't coming back, and he wasn't staying stuck. And I think a lot of times we give ourselves too many options, right? And as a result, we just stay stuck in the proverbial Kansas City.
I think most of us can relate because how many times have we tried to do something and then we get sideswiped with life, whether it's a situation, whether what we've tried to do wasn't taken what we thought it was going to be taken like. So we had we wanted to do something and we just basically just got, I guess, desensitized, demotivated, whatever it is. And right now there's so much noise that we can go in so many different directions. And I think one of the other C's that I'm, it's like a big, it's like a big bright light, and it's like a big loud noise, and it's commitment. You have to make a commitment, and I think
$40 single suitcase, one-way ticket.
that's
Commitment.
it. That's it.
Board the train.
Because it's like bam, and then he's like, he's not going back. It's that way. And if you decide and you commit, I do believe that we can accomplish almost
Absolutely.
anything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the thing that I like to talk about is, imagine for just a moment, Walt's walking around in Kansas City. He's homeless. He's eating beans out of a can. He's getting a shower like once a week on Saturday nights because somebody is like donating the money for that to happen. And a stranger walks up to him on the street and says, "Hey, you need to figure out how to get the money to buy 27,440 acres in Central Florida, because you're going to be building the world's largest and most popular vacation destination."
From being homeless. Yeah.
It would have blown his mind.
Never.
But that's what we tend to do, right? We don't realize it's one step, it's one day, it's one dream, it's one task at a time. We get completely overwhelmed and we go absolutely nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, there's that vision, that dream that burns in you, like, that's what's propelling them. But in your scenario, right, you even said that the one thing you would regret is not writing the book. Why do you think that was? Like, what was the driving force behind you knowing that I'm supposed to be writing this book? Like, what did you feel?
Ooh, I don't know that anyone's ever asked me that question.
Figures.
I get I get kind of tingly hearing that. I think at my very youngest age, I wanted to be a writer, and I always wanted to use story as a vehicle for making a difference in people's lives. And so when I learned that Walt didn't want to be remembered for Mickey Mouse or Snow White or even Disneyland, he most wanted to be remembered as a storyteller. That really resonated. And then secondly, I've always been like super curious. What is it that causes some people to be successful, to break out of dysfunction? This kid makes it, that kid doesn't. And, could I possibly be a catalyst to help, influence change? And that's always, sort of driven me. And the idea that I could, hijack Walt's story, if you will, and use my experiences in the park, not as an escape, but as an example, just lights me up.
So in the park, is it like I notice, especially his older rides, there's a lot of this, oh, the ride is nice, then it's all of a sudden like doom and you're gonna die, and then it's like a happy ending. Is that because that's kind of different from like all the other, is that the storytelling component?
Yeah, so we have story all wrong in 2025. Most of us think story is happily ever after ending, and as a result we chase that sort of conclusion, and we're seeking comfort, and as a result we're miserable. Every great story does not require a happily ever after ending. Every great story requires, guess what? Conflict. And if you're not doing hard and difficult things, if you don't have conflict in your story, you're bored. You don't really have a story. You're like a middle-aged man driving a Volvo in the suburbs. Nobody cares. And so those rides are an example of a story introducing conflict that makes things interesting, and an example of now go out and start living your own great story.
Good perspective. There's so many of these things we can apply to our own life. My question, and I know we have a question over here too, but my question also is, that last C is curiosity. When I think about that, I think curiosity should be the first C, right? Because that's usually what's going to start you on the path of like what's under this rock or whatever. But he puts it at the last, and I'm wondering, is there a relevance to it? The placement of that C being at the last part of the four C's.
Well, let me be clear. The only one that Walt put more prominent over the other was confidence.
I see.
The rest of them fall in whatever order Jeff remembers them. And
Okay,
sometimes
that makes sense.
And
All right.
sometimes I struggle 2 brain surgeries later to remember all 4 of them. And it is interesting because Walt never got past 9th grade in his formal education. And so he responds in the context of, it's not the high school diploma or the higher education degree. If you have these 4 C's, starting first and foremost with confidence, and apply them, you can achieve anything. And he genuinely believed that, and he genuinely lived it.
Okay. Marissa, you have a question?
Or you had this dream of writing and stuff, and then it's a 2-parter. One of them is when you only have $40 in a one-way ticket, it's almost like you have nothing to lose. And in those depths of despair where you're all in is when you truly find the answers, because you're not really lacking. You've already lacked. So it's like, this is it, and it's in a biblical expression. The lady and her son gave the last and said, we're going to die tonight of starvation. And then Jesus came to the door. It's like a parable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you have nothing and you sacrifice it, it's like this faith leap, but you didn't know you needed to be there. So I guess it's not a question. It's I relate with you. And then the second part is when you're teaching about that, are you hitting the places where you need to be hitting, where people have hit that rock bottom, like in the prison system or when we're trying to get our kids back and stuff? Because God's going to use you there, man.
Yeah, so thank you. I've had the opportunity and the honor and the privilege of speaking in all sorts of different places. I don't think I've done a prison yet. I've been asked about Disneyland's jail, which is a whole different conversation. But it is interesting how you end up meeting people in different places and different stages of their life. And I'll give you an example. I was in a really hard place in January of 2021, the hardest place I've ever been in my life. And I woke up that morning and I was like, not even sure like why I was even still here. And I prayed a prayer. Now I have a background in theology, and I prayed a prayer that if I found out one of my students had prayed, I would have like failed them because it's so theologically unsound. But it was basically like, God, I need a sign today showing me why I'm still here and why I should still be doing what I'm doing. 3:00 that afternoon, I got the best and longest email I've ever received from a reader. And she went on to talk about how she's a huge Disney fan. And over Memorial Day weekend of 2014, she discovered that her husband had been cheating on her with multiple different women. And rather than dealing with that issue, committed suicide in front of her, left her with 2 children to put through high school, put through college, and $50,000 in IRS debt. And she ended it with, no matter what you do, don't stop doing it. Because she loved Disney and she had read my book and felt so motivated and so encouraged to keep moving forward. And I immediately contacted her, and we're friends to this day. The ultimate kicker is in the course of our very first phone call conversation, we discovered we have the exact same birthday. And I don't mean like same day and same month, same day, same month, same year.
Oh, wow.
And again, her note ended with, no matter what you do, don't stop doing what you're doing. So again, your ability to influence people in what you want to do, you don't have any power or control over that. There you go.
Just saying.
Yep. So,
Do you have a question?
As soon as I walked in, I saw the Disney books, and I thought I should have brought my 3 daughters because this is amazing. I want to commend you on everything you've done so far.
thank you.
I drive by CBU at least 5 times a day, and I'm going to look at that school a little bit different now.
Awesome.
My question to you is, are you aware of anyone else that created a curriculum or a class after you, after seeing your success and, hey, I could do this, I could teach this?
Great question. Am I aware of anyone else who has created a course following the history of Disneyland? Yes, so much so that I'm contributing a chapter in an academic book that's being published in August. That is 16 chapters by 16 different academicians on Disney curriculum in the field of academia. I feel fortunate because I was like at the very front end of it. And today it's like, pretty common. 10 years ago, almost unheard of. But a course specifically on Disneyland, to date, I've not heard of that. It's typically like business or animation, that sort of thing.
Let's get into, what about Imagineers? Do you have any content that centers around that?
Absolutely. I've been very fortunate. I've on multiple occasions have been at events on Disney property where I've had the opportunity to interview current and former Disney Imagineers, to include some who were hired by and worked alongside Walt Disney himself. And I just, am stunned every time I get the chance to do that. What I'm always moved by when that happens is Walt's impact on their life and their career trajectory. And the best example of that is Walt died December 15th, 1966. He was 65 years old. He was diagnosed with lung cancer in November of that year. He had started smoking cigarettes when he was an ambulance driver in France at the end of World War I, and went on to smoke 3 packs of cigarettes a day. When he was diagnosed with lung cancer, he was given 6 months to 2 years to live. He lasted only 5 weeks. And when I asked these legends, these Imagineers, what was it like for you the day that Walt Disney died? To a person, they cannot and will not answer that question. They are so emotional and still get so torn up 55 years later that they cannot and they will not go there. My other, which I think is really emotional, Imagineering story is Walt as a leader. And I think this is really important. Walt was not particularly gifted at anything, to include animation. Of iWorks was the real gifted animator who helped make Mickey Mouse so successful. The only theme park attraction designed by Walt Disney is Tom Sawyer Island. Walt had the vision, and then he motivated and he encouraged and he cast that vision in such a way that it was so compelling that people couldn't wait to follow him and make it even better than Walt himself had actually dreamed or actually envisioned. Walt would task people, say, for example, how many of you have ridden on Pirates of the Caribbean? And you're familiar with the song, right? Yo ho, yo ho.
Pirate's life for me.
Exactly. Written by an Imagineer by the name of Ex Extencio. Walt pulled Ex Extencio out of the Imagineering office and said, you're going to write the song for Pirates of the Caribbean. And Ex Extencio looked at Walt and said, Walt, I've never written a song in my life. I have no idea how to do that. And Walt looks at him and says, that's okay. It's time you learn.
I love it.
Bob Gurr. Bob Gurr, who designed all of the motor vehicles, Main Street vehicles, Autopia cars, went on to design the monorail and the submarine voyage and the Matterhorn. Hated roller coasters. And the Matterhorn is Disneyland's first e-ticket attraction. It's also the world's first tubular steel roller coaster. It was the first attraction that required trigonometry to get designed. By the way, not only did Bob Gurr hate roller coasters, trigonometry was the only course in high school he ever failed. And so when Walt asked Bob to design the Matterhorn, he was like, Walt, I hate roller coasters. I don't know how to do this. This is going to require math that I failed in high school. That's okay, Bobby. It's time you learn. Plaza Inn Restaurant at the end of Main Street, designed by John Hinch. He was probably Walt's favorite Imagineer. A lot of Sleeping Beauty Castle was designed by John Hinch. And here it is, Disneyland's 10th birthday in 1965. And Walt wants to upgrade the Red Wagon restaurant into the Plaza Inn. And he says, John, let's get to work designing a restaurant. And John's like, I can give you a Disneyland. I can give you a castle. I've never designed a restaurant in my life. That's okay, John. Time you learn. So next time you don't know how to do something, tell yourself that's okay. Time you learn.
Dang, man.
It's in the Matterhorn. And if you go on Disney Plus, I don't remember exactly which episode it is. It's in the Imagineering story. You get to see Bob Gurr. I've done a number of events with Bob. Great, great, great guy. You get to see Bob Gurr go in and shoot baskets, but even more so, he signs his name on the wall, and he had never done that. And this is the guy who designed it. Now, there's a lot of rumors for why the basket. It's not really a basketball court. It's really just a goal. We've made that out to be a bigger thing than it actually is, but it is cool. Yeah. Great questions.
Yeah, I'm Peggy.
Well, thank you for gracing us today with your presence.
Thanks for having me.
It's been very interesting so far. You talked about curiosity and resilience. How long did it take for Walt Disney to actually become successful with Disneyland? How old was he? How long did it take?
20 years, 1 year, 1 day. And here's what I mean by that. The idea for Disneyland came when Walt took his 2 young girls, Diane and Sharon, out for what he called Daddy's Day. Every Saturday afternoon, he would take Diane and Sharon around in Southern California, beach, mountains, museums. Their favorite place to go was the little merry-go-round in Griffith Park, which was really close to their home in Los Angeles. And if you've ever had a kid, been a kid, grandkid, and gotten on a merry-go-round, you know they never want to ride it just one time, right? And so Diane and Sharon are spinning on that merry-go-round, and Walt is sitting on the bench. And instead of being stuck on his cell phone, reading social media, right, doom scrolling, he's sitting with his thoughts. And he begins to think, and he begins to dream of a place where parents and children could have fun together. And that's where the idea, that's where the dream was born. Now, it took him many years before he actually started taking action on that. And initially, he was going to build it off of the studio in Burbank. He had about 8 extra acres, and he drew it up. He referred to it as Mickey Mouse Park. He actually took it to the Burbank City Council in 1952. And the Burbank City Council told Walt, no, we don't, quote unquote, want a carnival atmosphere in our town. Well, Walt understood that no simply means next option. And so he hired the Stanford Research Group, which was run by Harrison Buzz Price and Woody, I can't remember Woody's last name, but basically it was run by Buzz and Woody. And I'm not making this up. You can look it up. to find him the best location to build his park in Southern California. They researched 150, recommended 4, the number 1 site being the Ball Road subdivision in Anaheim. They broke ground July 17th, 1954, opened July 17th, 1955. They built Disneyland in exactly a year. Today, Disney can't build and open a Starbucks in a year, but they built the first park in exactly a year. And then the one day, the opening day, was probably the worst day of Walt Disney's life. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. They refer to it as Black Sunday to this day. But Walt took responsibility for everything that was wrong, set a course for fixing it, and by Labor Day of 1955, they were welcoming its 1 millionth guest. And truth be told, Walt never really was financially secure and truly felt successful until the other side of the opening of Disneyland and the other side of Black Sunday. One of my favorite stories is when they were in production for Mary Poppins. Walt was used to Roy giving him grief, and I could tell you a lot of Roy stories. Roy was his older brother, 8 years his senior, who came alongside him with the second studio, which is today the world's largest entertainment company, originally called the Disney Brothers Studio. And the difference between the first studio, which went bankrupt in 18 months, and the second studio that today is the world's largest, the difference between the two isn't Walt, the difference was Roy. If it had been left up to Walt, he would have bankrupted the second studio multiple times over. In 1964, when they were in production for Mary Poppins, nobody said a word to Walt about why he shouldn't do it, why it wasn't going to work, why it wasn't going to be successful. And it terrified him because he was used to all of the doubters and all of the naysayers and people giving him grief, which I actually think is kind of sad because, only from like 1956 to 1966 was Walt actually, sort of secure with his success and comfortable in knowing it was all going to be okay.
So yeah, that's I have so many emotions right now and so many thoughts from what you've been talking about, and I feel like so many of us are struggling in different ways, and that the story of Walt, like I've heard you talk about Walt before, but not this level of depth, and it's really interesting how so many aspects of his life I can relate with, and I'm sure everybody listening to this can relate with, right? So I understand why this is such a big deal, and I understand why people from all over the world want you to come speak about this. You guys, this is freaking awesome.
And
So
what's cool is, I mean, the entire idea of trajectory is fire into fuel, right?
yeah,
And then, everything I believe is like the rubber band, like the low times create the spring shot for the possibility of high times. And it sounds like his whole belief in his storytelling had to do with embracing or even leveraging the lows so you can experience
Oh,
higher
absolutely.
high. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the best example of that is, Walt would go on to say, we can never forget it all started with a mouse. And that is 100% false. It started with Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. And he creates Oswald in the second studio, and it takes off in 1927 and is so successful that he's going to board another train from California to New York City with his wife, Lily. He's married at this point, and he wants to sit down with his distributor, Universal, and a fellow by the name of Charles Mintz and negotiate a bigger and better contract. And in the meeting, he is reminded when he signed that distribution deal, he had signed away the rights to the character. And while he and Lily were busy in the Big Apple, Universal here in Southern California had been busy hiring away the animators who had helped make Oswald so successful. And so Walt Disney does not walk out of that meeting with the bigger and better contract. He walks out with nothing. And it's on the train ride home, rather than getting on social media and complaining about it, rather than texting his therapist, rather than calling his attorney, he pulls out a pad of paper and gets to work. How many of our problems would be solved if we simply went to work? Pulls out a pad of paper, sketches out a story, shows it to his wife, Lily, and says, honey, what do you think of this guy? And Lily says, he's cute. What are you going to name him? And he says, well, I'm thinking about maybe possibly, what if we went with, I don't know, Mortimer? And Lily says, oh, God, no. That name is awful. What is the mouse going to be? A mortician? What if we went with Mickey instead? And so it was in that down moment, right? That moment of desperation. And we have all been there, that the world's most popular and, yes, profitable cartoon character was born.
Okay, speaking of Mickey Mouse and Disney, what is the Disney company's position on what you've accomplished? When you went to write the book, when you went to teach the course, where do they fit into your story for
Great
that?
question. So Disney is known as being quite protective of their trademark, their copyright, their characters, and going after folks who violate that. So that's a very legitimate question, a very legitimate concern. I asked around. Now, I didn't ask Disney legal because I was told if I waited for Disney to get back to me, I'd be dead first. And not from a brain tumor, but from just natural causes and old age. The advice I received was A, stay positive, and B, stay away from the characters. If you do that, you'll be fine. I'm 10 years in, and I'm happy to say I've been fine. Disney knows me. Disney's aware of me. Again, I've been on property doing events with legends, executives, Imagineers. A year and a half ago, was on the History Channel for How Disney Built America, which is now on Disney Plus / Hulu. And so while I've never worked for Disney and don't have a formal relationship with Disney, they are aware. And I have, again, fortunately not run afoul because I was aware of, again, not waiting or asking for permission, but also being respectful of their characters, their copyright, their trademark, and being extremely positive. Lindsay.
We need the mic. Back over here.
You remembered.
She said, why is 13 Walt Disney's favorite number?
Well, it is his favorite number, and we know this because the address for Disneyland is 1313 Harbor Boulevard. The 13th letter in the alphabet is the letter M, Mickey Mouse. Good question, and thanks for remembering.
Glad someone's paying attention, huh? Okay, so a couple things, but if you could put one phrase on a billboard when you have people driving, on the 405 and they're pissed off and because they're in a traffic jam or something happens in front of them and then, road rage, and they look up and they see a billboard. What you had a control of what they would see. Do you have a message that would be good for them to hear?
Get up off your damn park bench.
What do you mean by that?
I am convinced, and this is what motivated me to teach the class, write the book, to send out a motivational, inspirational email every single Wednesday, and to continue to travel the country and the world with this message. I believe we all have an idea, a crazy thought, some sort of dream that might not change the world, but could at least change your world. And the only difference between you and Walt Disney is Walt got up off of the park bench and took action. And we're stuck thinking about it, talking about it, dreaming about it. You can always overthink. You can never overact. So get up off of the park bench and start taking action.
That's very good. Yeah, man, the thing is, we all experience failure. We all experience adversity. There are so many things that happen in our life that we can't talk about right now, but each one of us are experiencing loss or adversity in our own ways.
You're going to have your Black Sundays.
You're gonna have
You're going to have your Oswalds. You're going to have your bankruptcies, for sure.
but we always have our imagination. We always have our thoughts and our dreams. And that's where I think I really want to, I guess, bring it home, is because just because you're in a situation right now does not define you. You are not defined by what is around the walls that you're looking in right now. You are not. You are only defined by your vision and your imagination. And I think it's so important for us to dream. Take a second, sit back and imagine, what if? Do it. Don't just, I'm not just saying that so I can hear myself talk. Actually do it. Sit back and say, what if? And think about your perfect situation. What if you were happy in a marriage? What if you had that job where you were making so much money you weren't worried about financial problems? What if you were able to overcome the sickness? What if that person that has been an a-hole gets fired and you don't have to look at their ugly face anymore? Whatever it is. But I think that that's where it starts. It starts with a thought, and then that thought. So something again, this is a personal thing for me. One of the last times I saw my dad in person, he was writing on a notepad, and what he wrote was, it started, a thought. A thought becomes an attitude. An attitude becomes an action. Action becomes your character.
Mhm.
Your character becomes your destiny. Now, I had heard that quote before. And so when I saw it, I was like, oh, yeah, Dad, I know that. I've seen that. I read it in one of the books. And so in my mind, I was quick to be like, oh, yeah, I see that. And then, right, I didn't consider it. I didn't sit with it. Now that he's passed away, I have a chance to sit with it. And I've sat with it a lot. And we all have thoughts. And that's where it begins. That thought. And it is your choice on that thought whether you're going to lean negative or whether you're going to lean positive. And I think that situation right here with that thought makes all the difference in the world. And if you can create a habit in your mind to lean towards the positive, even though you just get smashed in the face, I don't know, maybe there's something positive that you can come up with. And okay, I have stories. I'm not going to go in on that, but for sure, there are stories. You can always find the positive in a situation. And I guess I want to get it out to everybody that your thought, it starts with your thought. And with Walt, it started with a dream. And then the dream, then again, he did commit. And so if you can sit down and think about what if and create that situation in your mind, the universe will get in line with you and it will help you to accomplish what that is. Just like Walt, he's overcome so many different things. And now, even for you, he's inspired you. His actions created a ripple effect, numerous ripple effects, but we're all here experiencing one of them because he inspired you in such a way that you wrote a book, that you are here talking to all of us now. And I think all of us have that situation. All of us have that opportunity where our actions can inspire people that we've never met or we don't know, but it starts with our thoughts. So again, Jeff, you are awesome. Thank you so much
Thanks for having me.
for coming here. And does anybody else have any questions or?
Oh, well, you can find me at my website, thewisdomofwalt.com. The books are available not just at my website, but on Amazon. First book is The Wisdom of Walt, Leadership Lessons from the Happiest Place on Earth. Beyond the Wisdom of Walt, Life Lessons from the Most Magical Place on Earth. And if nothing else, go to my website under resources and sign up 100% free for the weekly Wednesdays with Walt motivational and inspirational blog. My wife and I, we are writing a relationship book based and themed on Disney, and that will be out later this year. And then the blog compilation is going to come out in 2026. And so if you want to stay up to date with the message or where we are in the country or where we are in the world, again, just go to the Wisdom of Walt under resources, sign up for the email. It's completely free. And if you want to talk about books or do a leadership lab or a keynote, send me a message. And you can find me on Instagram, Dr. Disneyland, or Facebook, Jeff Barnes.
One last thing. So, just thank you for coming. First of all,
Of course.
But the one positive thing for everybody is that's watching. The positive thing is, what we believe in trajectory is that any bad situation that you're in, any struggle, that is your fuel. And that what does that fuel do? Allow you to move.
So feel free to join in, but MOVE is an acronym. M is make a difference in other people's lives. O, offer up your time, talents, and gifts. V, find victory in the small things. And E, encourage others. You've encouraged all of us. I invite all of you to encourage somebody and move. Get up, get your ass off the park bench.